Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the CosmicCast. This is pretty much going to be my very first podcast on the channel. And what I wanted to talk about today, I wanted to touch up on being an OG, as you say, to the Kingdom Hearts franchise and Final Fantasy X. Um, Pretty much, when I first played both the games, I played it in it was about 2003. I was in the ninth grade during that time frame, and I remember my mother, buying me my very first PlayStation 2, because at the time I just had the regular PlayStation. I only had the PS1, and it was like mine was like the slim version of the PS1 at the time. So the PlayStation 2 that I had was, the original one. It was, the big bulky one. It wasn't the mini one because the mini one had, not came out yet. Um, but as soon as I, got those games back during that time frame, um, YouTube wasn't really as popular as it was now in terms because it's not like you could jump online and you could find like strategies to these games like you can now. You can find plenty of strategies on Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy X. There's a lot out there. um because back then, when I played Final Fantasy X, you know um I didn't really find all the jet spears and the Albed primers, and I didn't get all the ultimate weapons because I wasn't able to buy the strategy guide during that time frame. Which the strategy guides, I think back then, I think it cost about like $14.99, and you could get those at it was a store called at the time it was called EB Games. That was before they transitioned over and named it GameStop. So they had the big thick strategy guides for both Final Fantasy X, and they had it also for Kingdom Hearts. I remember going back and getting the strategy guide for Kingdom Hearts, but I never did get the strategy guide for the Final Fantasy X. I did end up getting it for, however, for 10-2 when 10-2 came out, because I was like, well, I know this game, I'm definitely not gonna know what to do. So I end up purchasing both 10-2 and the strategy guide together when I brought them. Um, Back also when I had played, when I first played Kingdom Hearts, I remember the platforming on that. Kind of remind me along the lines of Jack and Daxter in a way, because I was more so used to that, before I started playing Kingdom Hearts anyway. So the the worst thing about Kingdom Hearts was it was the camera angle at that time frame. The camera angle was really like terrible. Like it's like every time you jump, it's like you always turned around, and you was like, okay, well, how would I get in this angle? And also when I had played Kingdom Hearts, I just pretty much went into a blind, so I absolutely knew nothing about the direction I was going in. So I remember pretty much getting lost for like hours on end until I actually figure out, oh, this is what I had to do, or oh, this is the way I had to go. Um, but anyway, I eventually end up, figuring it out. I didn't, figure out how like the leveling worked, like like the fastest way to level up until like it was probably like until I actually eventually beat the game. I figured out the leveling, and I figured out you could go, back into the tournaments at the Olympus Coliseum, and you could gain like fast levels that way. It wasn't, when you were together with Donald and Goofy, you couldn't, really, gain as much experience as you wanted to. It was pretty much once you got to that part where, Sora being alone in the tournament, that, that's where it was like easier and faster to level up. As far as Final Fantasy X goes, I'm not really sure like the fastest way to gain levels on like the spear grid. I'm thinking like, it could be a possibility that, you could, like put maybe like Titus or someone alone to, face the enemies and see if you can gain like, more spear grid levels that way. That could be a possibility. Um, the thing is about some of the strategies, that involved, you know, Kingdom Hearts 1, um, pretty much for half the bosses, what I would do was, and I know a lot of, you know, OG people would probably also do this as well, since you didn't know various strategies during that time frame, was probably pretty much, jump and slash. The jump and slash maneuver, it worked in several situations, that was, pretty much like tough to get out of with a lot of bosses. So there's like a lot of aerial type, moves that was required to help beat some of the bosses. Along with, a good like magic spell like arrow, that was like, pretty much like my bread and butter back then. Because back then, there wasn't a level one, proud or level one critical, during that time frame. The time I played it when I was in high school. So, um, I mean, I wish it was, but it is now. But level one wasn't as popular as it was, now. Some of the strategies was probably still there, but I didn't know about most of them, especially like with the stop spell, where you can like you could stop Captain Hook, or you could stop Maleficent. That was pretty much new to me. Like years later, after I had, beaten the game, and I was like, oh, I didn't know that was a strategy. But, um, like I said, because my stress was pretty much jump, hit, arrow, and, you know, I would use thunder, here and there. But, that was pretty much it, when it came to that. When it came to Final Fantasy X, I really didn't figure out, like until later, especially like how to get like all of Tidus's overdrives. Like at the time frame, I didn't even know that to get that, you just had to repeat, his overdrives over and over again until like the next one came. And then, I finally realized it like later after I like pretty much had beaten, the game as well. And it's pretty good to go back, and look at these things years later, and figure out like, oh, okay, well, it was pretty much easier to do it this way, or better to do it that way. But that's where those strategies and all that stuff, the leveling stuff comes into play, and you know, and that's where YouTube comes in now too, because it's full information out there, so now you don't even really need a strategy guide, to get through these games, because some of the top people on there, some of the top YouTubers, who streams on, either YouTube or Twitch, the majority of them has, shown people, that, here's various strategies that you can use to, pretty much beat the game. And, that's pretty much why I consider myself as like, one of the OGs, because, I played it without even knowing, who, like, I didn't know who Mist was, because, back then. He wasn't out back then. Biz. A lot of the top YouTube Kingdom Hearts gamers. Wasn't really around back then. So that's why I pretty much consider myself as definitely one of the OGs, and I know that there's probably plenty of more OGs who came from that era where they was pretty much just going through the game, jumping and slashing and running around getting lost, for pretty much hours and hours. But both the games were pretty much fun to play because I ended up actually picking up both of the games, Kingdom Hearts 10 and um I ended up picking up like Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy um 10. I ended up picking them both up actually around the same time frame, I think. So yeah, I picked them up both together. And after I picked those up, I shortly picked up Jack and Daxter 2. I picked it up first, and then I went back and I picked up Jack and Daxter 1. So the series was pretty much a good series to get into because I enjoyed both getting into those series at the time frame, because it gave me an opportunity to pretty much get into the franchise of these games, and I'm still into the franchise of both Final Fantasy and Kingdom Hearts now, because the first Final Fantasy game I played was actually Final Fantasy Tactics. It was more so like a almost like a chess game, I would say. I enjoyed playing that, and then from there, the second Final Fantasy game I played was it was actually the original Final Fantasy 7 to the PlayStation. That in Final Fantasy 8 and also Final Fantasy 9. Those was the original Final Fantasy games that I grew up with, and started off playing um, at the time. And another original game on PS1 I played was The Legend of Dragoon. That's pretty much what got me into actually the RPG games. Was playing The Legend of Dragoon back then to the PlayStation, because there's actually a story behind that, but I'll probably end up saving that for the next episode of the podcast. So I definitely will, you know, tell that story, if I have like more time, because I want to at least try to make this, probably like at least 20 minutes long if I can, if possible, if I have the time. But yeah, we'll get into that in the next podcast because it's a pretty good story behind the Legend of Dragoon and how I got into the RP G scenes. Because I pretty much my first console was a Game Boy. It was a Game Boy that was like with no color. It was black and white. Um, and the Game Boy itself, was the color of the Game Boy was black. So I played that for a good portion of the time, and that was before I got my second console, which I will talk about that in a future podcast about the different consoles that I got when I was a kid. Um, but back to more of the Kingdom Hearts series, Kingdom Hearts One. Um, when I had first, like played it, I had actually borrowed it from a friend of mine before I got my own copy, and that's how I got into it. I was like, oh, I was like, Kingdom Hearts. I was like, I never heard of this before. And, of course, I didn't know it was like, you had to go around and, you had to go to like Disney worlds and stuff like that until like I actually, started playing it. But when I started playing it, I got into it, and that's definitely what made me, want to get my own copy. And I was like, okay, I got to get my own copy of this now because this is a pretty decent game. It's like it's not a bad game, and that's how I got into the series, and I started following it, and once I started following it, the series wasn't confusing like how the majority of people, say that it is now. It would probably be confusing, like if you didn't start off playing, uh, Kingdom Hearts one, when if you, especially if you didn't like grow up like playing that, and that wasn't your very first Kingdom Hearts game that you played. I would say that definitely start with that one first. I say start with Kingdom Hearts one. That's what I started with. You can start with that, or you can either start with Birth by Sleep, because shortly after, Kingdom Hearts 1 and 2, I didn't play Birth by Sleep until probably about maybe 2000, like after 2007, I believe. It was after, yeah, it was after 2007 because, you know, the PSP wasn't out then. And You definitely needed, if you wanted to play Birth by Sleep, you needed to at the time you needed the PSP to play, Birth by Sleep because it wasn't out to the PlayStation, just yet. It didn't come out until like several years later to the PlayStation once, the PS4 came around. But at the time I had already, played through, Kingdom Hearts 1 and Kingdom Hearts 2. I had also played through that. And I had also played through Rechain of Memory because shortly after they came out with that, after you know that was like way after Kingdom Hearts 2 was already finished, and I had already beaten both KH1 and 2 by the time they did Rechain of Memories. So I played Rechain of Memories and I beat that, and then after that, shortly after, then they went back and they did Birth by Sleep, and Birth by Sleep came that definitely became one of my favorites also to play. KH1, Birth by Sleep, um, and KH2, Kingdom Hearts 2 for me. You know, because I those was the some of the top ones that I grew up playing. So yeah, so Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy definitely holds a special place in my heart for me. So I definitely come from that era where just figuring things out without strategy guides and without the use of YouTube. Um, but now I'm grateful, because now I'm one of those people that like to help people and do less plays and walkthroughs. If you watch some of my videos, um, I definitely enjoy helping others figure out how to play or beat the game. Um, and I also enjoy a little bit of voice acting also on my channel. But like I said, I will definitely explain like how I got into the voice acting in another episode of the podcast here. And I definitely enjoyed these talks. So if you enjoyed it also, feel free to check out all my videos on the channel. Go to the videos. Also, check out the playlist. You can click the playlist and check out the games that I've done so far. And also, be sure to give the video a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and share the video with many others who might enjoy, this type of content, and who might enjoy the podcast also. So I will definitely see you guys in the next one. It's been fun. Peace.